The sand whipped across Darren Holt's visor, obscuring his vision momentarily before the auto filters kicked in. He crouched behind a half-buried mining container, checking the charge on his plasma cutter. The dilapidated mining outpost of Arvax 4 stretched before him, its once proud human technology now repurposed by interplanetary slave traders. Butcher, status report, Darren whispered into his comm. Target location confirmed, Captain. The tinny voice of his ship's AI responded. Biometrics indicate the Syndicate hostage is being held in the Eastern Quadrant. Minimal guard presence detected, though I'm picking up unusual energy signatures throughout the compound. Darren grimaced. After this rescue, his debt to the Syndicate would be cleared. No more jobs he didn't choose, no more missions with questionable ethics. Just him, his ship Gloomy Susan, and the vast expanse of stars to explore at his leisure. Keep the engines hot, he murmured. I'll be back with the package in 20. His tactical display highlighted the optimal insertion path through the compound. The slavers were careless, their security systems outdated, and their guards often drunk on fermented Jovian moss. Typical frontier outlaw operation, nothing he hadn't handled a dozen times before. The first guard went down without a sound. Darren stunned Batten, leaving the hulking alien in a twitching heap. The second never even saw him coming. Within minutes, he'd reached the Eastern Quadrant and located the cell block. 6 doors, only one showing active power consumption. The hostage had to be there. As Darren worked on bypassing the security lock, a soft, melodic hum caught his attention. It wasn't coming from the designated cell, but from further down the corridor. Curiosity, always his weakness, pulled him toward the sound. Around the corner, he found a separate detention area. Unlike the crude metal cages used for common slaves, this cell gleamed with advanced technology. A pulsating blue energy field contained a single occupant, a woman, or at least something remarkably woman-shaped, with sleek azure skin that shimmered like polished opal under the harsh lights. She sat cross-legged, eyes closed, the source of the haunting melody that had drawn him. Her body was adorned with intricate silver markings that seemed to shift and change as she breathed. When she opened her eyes, startlingly violet with no pupils, Darren felt a chill run down his spine. Zirathi, he whispered, recognizing her species from old war stories. Elite warriors from the outer systems, rarely seen this close to human space. Her gaze locked onto him with predatory intensity. You should not be here, human. Darren knew he should walk away. The hostage was waiting, the mission clear. But something in those alien eyes held him transfixed. Pain, defiance, and something else. Hope, perhaps. Neither should you, he replied, already pulling out his hacking module. How long have they kept you here? Time means little in captivity, she replied, watching his hands work on the control panel. What you're attempting is futile. Only genetic keys from my captors can. The energy field collapsed with a soft sizzle. The Zirathi woman stood suddenly, her full height impressive, nearly 7 feet of lithe, powerful muscle. Impossible, she whispered. Darren shrugged. Security override. Universal decryptor. Cost me 3 months' pay, but worth every credit in situations like this. She stepped out of her cell cautiously, as though expecting a trap. When none came, her violet eyes narrowed. You freed me from chains, Earthman, but now you are bound to me. Darren chuckled. Look, I'm happy to help, but I've got another rescue to complete, and we both need to be off this rock before security realizes something's wrong. The Zirathi woman tilted her head. My name is Arwell Vanna, she said, her tone formal. And you do not understand what you have done. A sound like thunder rolled through the compound. Darren's tactical display lit up with movement. Lots of movement, approaching fast. We need to go. Now. He turned to sprint back toward his primary objective, but Arwell Vanna moved with inhuman speed, blocking his path. They come for me, she said. For us. My sisters. The corridor filled with the unmistakable blue-skinned forms of Zirathi warriors, at least a dozen of them, armed with weapons that looked ceremonial but deadly. Their leader stepped forward, taller than Arwell Vanna, with elaborate silver markings across her face. I am Zerneth, first blade of the sisterhood," she announced, her voice like polished stone. "You have invoked the ancient right by your actions, human." Darren raised his hand slowly. "Look, I was just passing through, doing a good deed. No ancient rites involved." A murmur passed through the assembled warriors, and several made a strange gesture across their chests. "According to our law," Zuraneth continued, "by freeing one, you bind yourself to all her sisters. You must accept us, or face the right of absorption." Darren's mind raced. "The right of what now?" Arwylvanna placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come with us, Earthman. Your fate is now entwined with ours, whether you wish it or not." "Wait," Darren protested. "I still have a mission to complete. Someone I need to rescue." Zuraneth made a dismissive gesture. "Your syndicate hostage has already been secured by my sisters. We have observed your movements since you landed." Darren felt the situation spiraling out of control. One minute, he was completing a straightforward rescue mission. The next, he was surrounded by alien warrior women talking about binding rituals. "I'm not going anywhere until someone explains what's happening," he insisted. A younger Zirathi pushed forward suddenly, her face alight with excitement. "Is the one from the prophecy, Zura, the one who breaks chains without knowing their weight?" Zuraneth silenced her with a look. "Enough, Myra. The human will learn our ways in time." She turned back to Darren. "We cannot speak freely here. Exonex forces will soon converge on this position. If you value your freedom, and hers, you will come with us now." The name Exonex sent a chill through Darren. The megacorporation had tentacles in everything from weapons manufacturing to biotech, and they were notorious for operating above the law in frontier systems. "Fine," he conceded. "But once we're safe, I get explanations and my freedom." Arwylvanna's expression remained impassive, but something like sorrow flickered in her eyes. "One of those requests can be granted, Earthman." The Zirathi moved with military precision, escorting Darren and Arwylvanna through the compound via tunnels he hadn't detected on his initial scan. Within minutes, they emerged into a massive hangar bay where an impressive vessel waited, sleek, predatory lines marking it as a warship despite its relatively modest size. "The Starborn Vengeance," Arwylvanna said, noting his appreciative gaze. "Our home for many cycles now. What about my ship?" Darren asked as they boarded. Zuraneth gestured to a younger warrior. "Myra will retrieve your vessel. The AI is already being integrated into our systems." "Butcher is coming too?" "Wait, integrated?" Darren's protests were cut short as the ship's engines roared to life, the hangar doors above sliding open to reveal Arvax 4's dusty orange sky. As they ascended into orbit, Darren found himself guided to what appeared to be the ship's command center. A dozen more Zirathi operated various stations, each acknowledging Zuraneth with respectful nods as she entered. One figure stood apart from the others, an older Zirathi with silver-streaked hair and robes instead of armor. She regarded Darren with keen interest. "So this is the human who has altered our fate," she said, her voice gentler than the others. "I am Veltri, Keeper of Knowledge." Zuraneth inclined her head. "The Liberator must be briefed, Veltri. Exonex will not delay in their pursuit." "Liberator?" Darren interrupted. "Look, I appreciate the grand title, but I really just want to know what's going on. Why am I suddenly bound to Arwylvanna? What's this about her sisters? And what in the void is the right of absorption?" Veltri gestured to a circular table at the center of the room, where a holographic display activated. "Our story is long and complex, Darren Holt, but I will give you the essence." The hologram showed a beautiful world of soaring crystal formations and vast blue plains. "Zyra, our homeworld. For 10,000 years, we were a race of warriors and scholars, living in harmony with our sacred traditions." The image shifted to show massive ships descending from the sky. 3 centuries ago, Exonex discovered unique properties in our genetic makeup: adaptability, enhanced strength, telepathic potential. They came as traders but remained as conquerors. Scenes of battle flickered across the display, showing Zirathi warriors fighting against mechanized forces. "We fought bravely, but were ultimately subdued through biological warfare. Exonex modified our genetic code, creating what they called a loyalty chain, a biological imperative that bound us to specific masters. Darren watched, horrified, as the hologram depicted Zirathi being loaded into stasis chambers. They sold us throughout the galaxy, perfect soldiers, bodyguards, and slaves. Our will remained our own, but our bodies obeyed their masters. Arwell Vanna spoke softly beside him. Until you broke my chain, Darren Holt. The first to be truly freed in 3 centuries. Veltri nodded. Our ancestors foresaw this possibility and created a safeguard, the Liberation Protocol. Any outsider who breaks a Zirathi's bonds becomes spiritually and biologically linked to the freed individual, and by extension, to her entire lineage. So when I freed Arwell Vanna, you became bound to all Zirathi of her bloodline, Zaraneth confirmed. Our loyalty protocols were transferred to you. It is an ancient failsafe, ensuring that freedom would only come through one who would accept responsibility for those freed. Darren ran a hand through his hair in frustration. And if I don't want this responsibility? The atmosphere in the room chilled perceptibly. Then, Veltri said carefully, the right of absorption would be invoked. Your essence would be drawn into the collective consciousness of the Zirathi you freed, your physical form. Dissolved. Dissolved? As in, dead. Death is imprecise, Veltri corrected. Your consciousness would join with ours, your memories preserved. That's not exactly a comforting alternative, Darren muttered. Myra, the younger warrior who had called him a prophesied one, entered the command center. The human vessel has been secured. First Blade. The AI is resisting integration, but poses no threat. Good old Butcher, Darren said with a grim smile. Always was stubborn. Zaraneth turned to the navigation officer. Set course for the Deep Temple. We must complete the bonding ritual before Exonex tracks our position. Wait, Darren protested. I haven't agreed to anything yet. Arwell Vanna placed a hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly warm. You have time to decide, Darren Holt. But know this, you are the first to break a chain without using genetic keys or Exonex technology. Something our ancestors believed possible, but none have witnessed. Until now, Darren looked around at the Zirathi faces, some hopeful, others suspicious, all waiting. I need time to think, he said finally. Zaraneth nodded curtly. Arwell Vanna will show you to your quarters. We reach the temple in 18 hours. Your decision must be made by then. As Darren followed Arwell Vanna through the ship's corridors, he caught glimpses of Zirathi life. Warriors training in spacious chambers, others engaged in what appeared to be meditation, still others working on complex technological systems. How many of you are there? He asked. On this vessel? 43, Arwell Vanna replied. Throughout the galaxy? Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. Most still in bondage to their masters. And I'm supposed to free them all? Arwell Vanna stopped before a door, which slid open at her approach. According to the ancient texts, the liberation begins with one act of freedom freely given, without expectation of reward or obligation. The quarters were spartanly furnished, but comfortable by spacer standards. A window offered a view of stars streaking by as the ship entered hyperspace. I'll leave you to rest, Arwell Vanna said, turning to go. Wait, Darren called. Why me? Why now? Arwell Vanna hesitated. I do not know. For cycles, I sat in that cell, watching slavers come and go. Many humans, many species. Yet something called to you. Her violet eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. Perhaps freedom recognizes its own kind. Left alone, Darren paced the small room. Butcher, he called out. You there, buddy? To his relief, the familiar voice of his ship's AI responded through the room's comm system. Present, Captain, though they've attempted to restrict my access to their systems. Rather rude, if you ask me. What's your assessment of our hosts? The Zirathi vessel is highly advanced, despite appearing to be at least 70 years old. Their technology incorporates elements I cannot readily identify. As for the Zirathi themselves, biometric scans confirm unusual genetic modifications. Artificially induced, most likely. Darren slumped onto the bed. They say I'm bound to them now, that I have to accept responsibility for all of them or face something called the right of absorption. Curious, Butcher replied. Their databases are heavily encrypted, but I've detected reference to this ritual. It appears to be a neurological and quantum process by which consciousness is transferred between entities. So they weren't exaggerating about the whole dissolving thing? Unknown, Captain. Though their ship's logs show no incidents of this ritual being performed in the last 300 years. Darren stared out at the streaking stars. What have I gotten myself into, Butcher? May I suggest, Captain, that this is merely another unexpected development in your generally chaotic existence? Despite everything, Darren laughed. Thanks for the perspective. He spent the next several hours alternating between restless sleep and anxious planning. The door chime eventually roused him from troubled dreams. Myra entered carrying a tray of food. Her enthusiasm was barely contained. First meal for the Liberator, she announced, setting it down carefully. Just Darren is fine, he said, eyeing the colorful assortment of unfamiliar foods. You're the one who called me a prophecy figure, right? Myra nodded eagerly. The texts speak of an outsider who breaks chains without tools, who sees warriors where others see weapons. She lowered her voice. Not everyone believes, but I do. I've waited my whole life to see the prophecy fulfilled. Darren picked at the food, surprisingly palatable, with flavors reminiscent of Earth's tropical fruits. How old are you, Myra? 22 cycles. Young for a Zirathi. And you've been enslaved all that time. Her expression darkened. I was born free on this ship. My mother escaped during Exonex's initial harvesting. Others joined later, freed through various means, though never permanently. The chain's call would eventually reclaim them. But Arwelvanna is different. Myra nodded. She was captured 5 years ago during a raid on an Exonex facility. We've tried everything to break her chain. Genetic reprogramming, psychic barriers, ancient rituals. Nothing worked. Until you. Darren considered this. And the others? Zaraneth? Veltri. First Blade Zaraneth was born in captivity, but escaped during transport 40 cycles ago. She has led our resistance since. Veltri is one of the last living scholars from Old Zyra, over 200 cycles old. She preserves our history, our traditions. Before Darren could ask more, the ship's alert system activated. Myra's expression shifted instantly from youthful enthusiasm to warrior readiness. We're under attack, she stated, already moving toward the door. Exonex has found us. The corridors were a flurry of organized activity as Darren followed Myra to the command center. Zaraneth stood before the tactical display, issuing orders with calm precision. 3 Exonex vessels, she announced as Darren entered. Advanced Hunter class. They've tracked Arwelvanna's chain signature. On the display, 3 predatory ships closed in on their position. The Starborn Vengeance had dropped out of hyperspace near a dense asteroid field. Tactical cover, Darren realized. Weapons status? Zaraneth demanded. Primary systems charged. First Blade, a tactical officer responded. But we cannot outgun 3 hunters. Darren studied the tactical display. Those are Mantis-class vessels, he said. I've dealt with them before. Fast, heavily armed, but they have a weakness in their sensor array. If we can get close enough to the larger asteroids. All eyes turned to him. Zaraneth's expression was unreadable. You would help us fight? I'm stuck on the ship too, Darren replied. And I've never been fond of Exonex. After moments' consideration, Zaraneth nodded. Speak your plan, human. For the next 10 minutes, Darren outlined a strategy using the asteroid field's unique properties to confuse the Exonex vessel's tracking systems. The Zirathi officers listened attentively, occasionally suggesting refinements that incorporated their ship's capabilities. It could work, Zaraneth conceded finally. Elm, take us in. Tactical. Prepare the countermeasures as directed. The battle that followed tested the limits of both ship and crew. The Starborn Vengeance danced through the asteroid field, using the massive rocks as shields against Exonex's superior firepower. Darren's knowledge of Exonex tactics proved invaluable, allowing them to anticipate attack patterns and set effective ambushes. At a critical moment, when one hunter had them locked in its weapon's sight, Myra executed a daring maneuver that brought them behind a rotating asteroid, just as energy torpedoes streaked past. "Impressive flying," Darren commented. Myra grinned. "I learned from studying old Earth combat vids. Your kind may be physically inferior, but you have creative tactics." 2 hours into the engagement, they'd managed to damage one Exonex vessel severely enough to force its retreat. The other two remained in pursuit, but were increasingly cautious. "They're calling for reinforcements," Veltri announced, monitoring communications. "We have perhaps 3 hours before additional forces arrive." Zaraneth turned to Darren. "We cannot reach the Deep Temple with Exonex in pursuit. Do you have another strategy, human?" Darren studied the star charts. "There's another option. If we can't outrun them or outfight them, we make ourselves worthless to chase." He pointed to a nearby system, the Veil Nebula. "Its radiation will mask all signatures, including Arwell Vanna's chain." "The radiation levels are extreme," a science officer objected. "Not for a ship with Zirathi shielding," Veltri countered, surprising Darren. "Our vessel was designed to withstand such environments. It is why Exonex has never captured this ship despite decades of hunting." Zaraneth made her decision quickly. "Set course for the Veil. Maximum speed." As the Starborn Vengeance accelerated toward the nebula, Arwell Vanna approached Darren. "You fight alongside us," she observed. "Yet you have not accepted the bond." "I don't need a mystical bond to know Exonex are the bad guys here," Darren replied. For the first time, something like a smile crossed Arwell Vanna's face. "Perhaps that is why the chains broke for you. You see clearly what others cannot." The ship shuddered as weapons. Fire glanced off their shields. The Exonex hunters were making a final desperate attempt to disable them before they reached the nebula's protective embrace. "Shields at 60%, the tactical officer reported. "Hull breach on deck 4, contained." "Divert power from non-essential systems," Zaraneth ordered. "Everything to engines and shields." The nebula loomed before them, a vast, swirling cloud of purple and blue gases, shot through with veins of cosmic radiation that would scramble sensors and communication. As they plunged into its outer layers, the pursuing ships hesitated, then broke off their attack. "They will wait," Veltri said. "Circle the nebula like predators." "Then we use this time wisely," Zaraneth declared. She turned to Darren. "You have proven yourself a valuable ally, human. But the matter of the bond remains unresolved." Darren crossed his arms. "I'm still not clear on what exactly this bond entails. Ownership? Command? Marriage to 43 warrior women?" A ripple of something like amusement passed through the command crew. "The bond is not ownership," Veltri explained patiently. "It is connection. The one who breaks the chain becomes the anchor point for a new kind of freedom, one based on choice rather than compulsion." "In practical terms," Zaraneth continued, "you would become our liberator, able to break the chains of other Zirathi by extending the freedom you granted Arwell Vanna." "I wouldn't have to marry anyone?" Darren asked cautiously. This time, Myra laughed outright. "Humans and their obsession with mating rituals. The bond transcends such physical concerns, though it does not preclude them," Arwell Vanna added softly, causing Darren to glance sharply at her. "The ritual must still be performed," Zaraneth said. "With Exonex hunting us, we cannot reach the Deep Temple on Zyra. But we carry a fragment of the temple with us, enough to complete the elemental bonding." Darren looked around at the faces watching him, expectant, hopeful, some still suspicious. "What happens if I agree to this bond? What do you expect me to do afterward?" "Lead us," Zaraneth said simply. "Not as a master, but as the focal point of our liberation. Together, we will free our enslaved sisters and brothers, dismantle Exonex's control over our people, and restore the Zirathi to their rightful place in the galaxy." "That's a tall order," Darren said, feeling the weight of their expectations. "It is your choice," Veltri reminded him. "As it must be. Freedom cannot be imposed, only offered and accepted." Darren took a deep breath. I need to see this ritual place. Then I'll decide. The heart of the Starborn Vengeance housed a chamber unlike any other on the ship. Where most sections were utilitarian despite their elegant design, this space felt ancient, sacred. Crystalline formations grew from floor to ceiling, catching and refracting the dim blue light. In the center, a pool of silvery liquid remained perfectly still despite the ship's movement. The water of memory, Veltri explained, gesturing to the pool, brought from the sacred springs of Zyra before its fall. It connects all Zirathi across time and space. The Zirathi had gathered in a circle around the pool, their normal military precision giving way to a more ceremonial arrangement. Zaraneth stood opposite Darren, with Arwal Vanna positioned between them. Veltri moved around the circle, lighting crystalline lamps that emitted a soft, pulsing glow. Here is where the rite of all or none is performed, she intoned. The human Darren Holt has freed Arwal Vanna of the House of Eternal Twilight from her chain of binding. By ancient law, he must now choose to accept the bond of liberation for all Zirathi of her lineage, or to surrender his essence to the collective. Darren shifted uncomfortably. Before we get to the surrendering essence part, can you explain exactly what this bond entails? What would I be committing to? Veltri nodded. The bond connects your life force to that of the Zirathi. You become the keystone of our freedom, able to break the chains of others as you broke Arwal Vanna's. In return, you gain certain attributes of our kind: enhanced strength, accelerated healing, limited telepathic connection to bonded Zirathi. And the downsides? If you die, the freedom you granted may falter. Those you have liberated could once again become vulnerable to control. And there is pain. The bond forges new neural pathways. It is not a comfortable process. Darren looked at Arwal Vanna. You've been quiet. What do you think of all this? Her violet eyes met his. I think you are being asked to bear a burden that is not yours. But I also believe you are capable of bearing it. She hesitated. I would understand if you refused. Something in her tone struck Darren. What happens to you if I refuse? Zaraneth answered instead. Her freedom would remain, but be incomplete. The residual chain would eventually reassert itself. Exonex would regain control. And the right of absorption? Would that protect her freedom? Veltri nodded slowly. It would. Your essence would reinforce the break in the chain, making it permanent. Darren paced the edge of the circle. So either way, Arwal Vanna stays free. But in one scenario, I'm alive and somehow connected to 43 warrior women, and in the other, I'm absorbed. A crude but accurate summary, Veltri confirmed. And if I accept this bond, what exactly would be expected of me? Do I become some kind of messianic figure leading a rebellion? Zaraneth's expression hardened. We do not need a messiah, human. We need a symbol, visible proof that the chains can be broken permanently. The rebellion is already underway, has been for centuries. Myra stepped forward suddenly. Tell him a truth, First Blade. Tell him what the texts actually say. The tension in the room shifted palpably. Zaraneth glared at the younger warrior. The ancient prophecies are not relevant to this discussion. They are the reason you're so determined to bind him to us, Myra countered boldly. Darren looked between them. What prophecy? The one about the Liberator? Veltri sighed heavily. There are passages in our oldest texts that speak of an outsider who would break the first chain, leading to the liberation of all Zirathi. Some interpret these passages literally, others as metaphorical teaching tools. And you believe I'm this prophesied figure? Darren asked incredulously. I believe in observable reality, Zaraneth replied sharply. You broke a chain that our best efforts could not breach. That makes you valuable to our cause, prophecy or not. Darren turned to Arwal Vanna. And what do you believe? She met his gaze steadily. I believe you saw me as a person to be freed, not a weapon to be claimed or discarded. That is miracle enough for me. Something in her simple statement resonated with Darren. Throughout his mercenary career, he'd tried to maintain a code, to see people as people, not targets or assets. It wasn't always easy in his line of work, but it mattered to him. I didn't set you free to own you, he told her softly. I set you free so you could choose. A murmur ran through the assembled Zirathi as he unconsciously echoed a line from their sacred texts. Arwylvanna's eyes widened. Those words. Darren shook his head. Just the truth as I see it. He turned to Veltri. I'll do it. I'll accept this bond. Not because of any prophecy, but because it's the right thing to do. No one deserves to be enslaved. Zaraneth's posture relaxed marginally. Then let the ritual begin. What followed was unlike anything Darren had experienced. The Zirathi began a low, harmonic chant that seemed to vibrate through the crystalline chamber. Veltri directed Darren to kneel at the edge of the silver pool, opposite Arwylvanna. Place your hands in the water of memory, she instructed. It will facilitate the connection. As Darren submerged his hands in the pool, the liquid seemed to embrace them, crawling up his wrists with gentle persistence. It was neither warm nor cold, but created a sensation of tingling awareness. Arwylvanna placed her hands in the pool as well, her fingers extending toward his beneath the silvery surface. When their fingertips touched, Darren gasped as a jolt of energy surged through him. Suddenly, he wasn't just in the ritual chamber. He was experiencing fragments of Arwylvanna's memories. The pain of the chain binding her will, the humiliation of captivity, the moments of defiance that had earned her brutal punishment. But also moments of beauty, dawn over the crystal plains of Zyra, the solidarity of her sisters in resistance, the fleeting joys preserved despite oppression. Through her eyes, he saw himself as he'd appeared in that prison corridor, a figure haloed in dusty light, offering freedom without demanding anything in return. The connection expanded beyond Arwylvanna. Brief, intense flashes from other Zirathi minds touched his consciousness. Zaraneth's fierce determination, Veltri's ancient wisdom, Myra's youthful hope. Dozens of lives, experiences, and emotions flowed through him, not overwhelming him, but becoming part of him in some ineffable way. When awareness of his physical surroundings returned, Darren found himself still kneeling by the pool, tears streaming down his face. Across from him, Arwylvanna was similarly affected. It is done, Veltri announced, her voice hushed with awe. The bond is formed. Darren stood shakily, feeling somehow both lighter and heavier than before. I felt everything, all of you. And Zaraneth said, her tone softer than he'd ever heard it. Your commitment to freedom is genuine. Perhaps Myra's faith was not misplaced after all. Before the implications of this could fully register, the ship's alert system activated. Exonex has entered the nebula. A voice announced over the comm. Multiple vessels. Detected on intercept course. The ceremonial atmosphere dissolved instantly as the Zirathi shifted back into warrior mode. Zaraneth strode toward the exit, issuing orders. All warriors to battle stations. Activate radiation shields. Prepare for close-quarters combat. Darren followed quickly. How do they track us through the nebula's interference? They shouldn't be able to, Veltri said, her expression grave. Unless they've developed new technology specifically to detect Zirathi biosignatures, Arwylvanna finished. They've been hunting us for centuries. It was inevitable they would adapt. The command center was already in battle mode when they arrived. Tactical displays showed 5 Exonex vessels converging on their position, using the nebula's radiation patterns to navigate. They've deployed boarding craft, the tactical officer reported. Estimated time to intercept, 3 minutes. Zaraneth turned to Darren. Now we see what the bond truly means, human. Will you fight alongside us? Darren felt a strange, new energy coursing through him. A side effect of the ritual, perhaps. Just point me toward the action. The battle for the Starborn vengeance was fierce and chaotic. Exonex boarding parties breached the hull at multiple points, deploying both human mercenaries and automated combat drones. The Zirathi fought with terrifying efficiency, their movements almost dance-like in their lethal precision. Darren found himself fighting alongside Arwylvanna near one of the primary breach points. The bond had enhanced his reflexes and strength, allowing him to hold his own against opponents that would have overwhelmed him days earlier. "On your left," Arwalvana called, seamlessly passing him her secondary blade as she disabled an Exonex combat drone with her primary weapon. Darren caught the blade and moved with newfound grace, feeling as though he'd trained with such weapons his entire life. The bond, he realized, had given him access to muscle memory and combat techniques from generations of Zirathi warriors. "This is actually kind of amazing," he admitted between strikes. "The bond has many benefits," Arwalvana replied, her back pressed against his as they faced opponents on all sides. "Though perhaps we should discuss them when we're not fighting for our lives." Through the ship's communication system, Butcher's voice suddenly crackled to life. "Captain, I've analyzed the Exonex vessels. Their primary objective appears to be the capture of Zirathi specimens, specifically Arwalvana. The second transport carries a science team led by someone named Dr. Elliot Vance." Darren parried an attack from a mercenary. "Vance? That name sounds familiar." Exonex's lead geneticist, Arwalvana explained grimly. "The architect of the modern chain. He has been hunting me since my escape." In another section of the ship, Myra and a squad of younger warriors were being pushed back toward the engine room. Exonex forces were deploying sonic weapons, devices specifically calibrated to disrupt Zirathi neural patterns. "We need reinforcements in Sector 7. Myra's voice came through the comm, strained and desperate. Zaranetha's reply was immediate. "All available warriors converge on Sector 7. Protect the engine core at all costs." Darren and Arwalvana fought their way through the corridors, cutting down drones and mercenaries as they moved toward Myra's position. Through the bond, Darren could sense the younger warrior's determination even as her strength flagged. They arrived to find Myra and 3 other Zirathi cornered in the engine room antechamber, a dozen Exonex troops closing in with sonic weapons at the ready. "Those devices will incapacitate the Zirathi," Darren realized aloud. "But they might not affect me the same way." Arwalvana nodded. "The bond gives you our strengths, but not all our vulnerabilities." Darren formulated a plan quickly. "Create a distraction. I'll circle behind and take out their sonic emitters." The strategy worked better than expected. While Arwalvana drew the Exonex force's attention with a frontal assault, Darren slipped through maintenance conduits, emerging behind enemy lines. The first 3 mercenaries went down before they knew he was there, their sonic weapons disabled with precision strikes. As the battle raged throughout the ship, Butcher continued providing tactical data. "Captain, I've infiltrated their communication systems. Dr. Vance is demanding Arwalvana be taken alive. Apparently, her specific genetic configuration is key to their new chain design. They want to make her the template for a new generation of slaves," Zaraneth concluded, her voice hard with fury. The tide began to turn as the Zirathi, guided by Darren's tactical suggestions and Butcher's intelligence, systematically isolated and eliminated the boarding parties. But the victory came at a cost. Several warriors lay wounded, and one section of the ship had been severely damaged. Just as it seemed they had gained the upper hand, a new threat emerged. The main hangar bay reported a breach. A specialized Exonex craft had forced entry, deploying what appeared to be a single operative. "Bioscan indicates augmented human," the security officer reported. "Heavily modified." Zaranetha's expression darkened. "A hunter. Exonex's elite retrieval specialists." Before Darren could ask for clarification, the ship's internal sensors went offline, plunging sections of the vessel into darkness. Emergency lighting activated, casting eerie blue shadows throughout the corridors. "He's targeting our systems," Veltri said. "Hunters are designed to retrieve valuable assets by any means necessary." Through the bond, Darren sensed a cold dread emanating from the Zirathi. These hunters were feared even by elite warriors. "Butcher," Darren called. "Can you track this hunter?" "Negative, Captain. His augmentations include sensor jamming technology. However, based on known hunter protocols, his primary target will be Arwalvana," Darren finished. He turned to her. "We need to get you to a secure location." But Arwalvana shook her head. "Running will not help. Hunters never stop pursuing their targets. Then we set a trap, Darren decided. Use what he wants against him. The plan came together quickly. If the hunter wanted Arwell Vanna, they would make her appear vulnerable, isolated in the meditation chamber near the ship's center. Meanwhile, Zirathi warriors would position themselves along all approach routes, with Darren and Zerneth concealed within the chamber itself. Minutes stretched into an hour as they waited in position. The hunter moved with ghost-like efficiency, avoiding all patrols and security measures. Only occasional glimpses on failing sensors revealed his progress through the ship, a shadow moving purposefully toward his target. In the dimly lit meditation chamber, Arwell Vanna sat in apparent solitude, her posture suggesting deep concentration. Through the bond, Darren could feel her tension despite her outward calm. "He's close," she whispered, eyes still closed. 3 corridors away. The hunter, when he finally appeared, was unlike any opponent Darren had faced. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, his body was a seamless blend of flesh and machine. Where eyes should have been, a smooth visor wrapped around his head, pulsing with data. His movements were utterly silent, inhumanly fluid. He paused at the chamber's entrance, scanning for traps. Apparently satisfied, he advanced on Arwell Vanna with measured steps. Asset R7. The hunter spoke, his voice synthesized and emotionless. "You will return to containment without resistance." Arwell Vanna's eyes opened. "I am no one's asset." The hunter's head tilted slightly. "Compliance is preferable, but not required. Dr. Vance requires only your genetic material and neural patterns." "He'll get neither," Darren said, stepping from concealment, Zaraneth emerging simultaneously from the opposite side. The hunter assessed the new threats without apparent concern. Interference noted. Calculating response. What followed was a combat unlike any Darren had experienced. The hunter moved with impossible speed, his augmented limbs weaponized for maximum efficiency. Zaraneth attacked with all the skill of a warrior who had fought for decades, while Darren relied on his newly acquired reflexes and the tactical awareness flowing through the bond. Even 2 against 1, they were barely matching the hunter. His augmentations gave him predictive combat algorithms, allowing him to anticipate and counter their moves almost before they made them. "We need to disrupt his systems," Darren called to Zerneth as they regrouped after a particularly brutal exchange. "The neural interface at the base of his skull," Arwell Vanna suggested. "It's the junction point for his augmentations." The hunter, apparently unconcerned by their strategic discussion, advanced methodically. "Resistance is prolonging the inevitable. Dr. Vance has invested significant resources in your retrieval. Asset R7. Something clicked in Darren's mind. "Vance. Exonex. Wait, I remember now. 3 years ago, I transported cargo for them, specialized medical equipment. The destination was a research facility called the Crucible," Arwell Vanna finished, her voice hollow. "The place where they perfected the modern chain." The hunter utilized their momentary distraction to launch a new assault, driving Zerneth back with a barrage of strikes that left even the first blade struggling to defend herself. As Darren moved to assist her, the hunter deployed a hidden weapon, a neural disruptor specifically calibrated for Zirathi physiology. Zerneth collapsed, her nervous system temporarily overwhelmed. Arwell Vanna rushed to her side, leaving Darren to face the hunter alone. "Your connection to the Zirathi is unexpected," the hunter observed, studying Darren with clinical detachment. "A biological anomaly worthy of study. Dr. Vance will find this development interesting." "Sorry to disappoint him," Darren replied, circling cautiously, "but we won't be available for his experiments." The hunter moved with sudden acceleration, faster than Darren could track visually. Only the enhanced reflexes granted by the bond allowed him to deflect the first strike, but the second caught him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing into the crystalline altar at the room's center. As Darren struggled to rise, the hunter advanced on Arwell Vanna, who stood protectively over Zerneth's unconscious form. "Final warning, Asset R7. Comply or suffer damage." Arwyl Vanna's stance remained defiant. My name is Arwyl Vanna of House Eternal Twilight. I am free, and I choose to fight. The hunter raised a hand that transformed into a specialized restraint device. Choice is an illusion for your kind. What happened next occurred so quickly that Darren's enhanced senses barely registered the sequence. As the hunter reached for Arwyl Vanna, a blur of motion intercepted him. Myra, launching herself from the entrance with reckless courage. She drove a ceremonial dagger deep into the junction point at the base of the hunter's skull, where his neural interface connected to flesh. Sparks erupted as critical systems failed, the hunter's augmentations convulsing with electrical feedback. But even damaged, the hunter remained lethal. With his remaining functional arm, he grasped Myra by the throat, mechanical fingers tightening with inhuman strength. Darren, drawing on strength he didn't know he possessed, threw himself forward, driving Arwyl Vanna's blade through the hunter's chest. The augmented human staggered, his systems failing catastrophically, but his grip on Myra didn't loosen. He didn't take us all, Myra gasped, her voice fading as her oxygen depleted. We chose to follow him, all of us. With a final surge of effort, she twisted the dagger deeper into the hunter's neural interface. A cascade of system failures rippled through his augmentations. His grip slackened, and Myra fell to the floor alongside her enemy as his systems went permanently offline. Darren and Arwyl Vanna rushed to Myra's side. The young warrior's eyes were dimming, her breathing shallow. Did I help fulfill the prophecy? She whispered. Arwyl Vanna took her hand. You did more than that. You saved your sisters. A smile touched Myra's lips. Then it was worth it. Her gaze shifted to Darren. Liberator, promise you'll free them all. Darren felt the weight of her request, and through the bond, the silent echo of the same plea from all Zirathi. I promise. Myra's eyes closed, her breathing stilled. In the silence that followed, Darren felt something shift in the bond. A presence fading, but somehow still connected, as though Myra's essence had become part of the collective consciousness that united them all. The aftermath of the battle was somber, but determined. Exonex forces, faced with the loss of their hunter and growing resistance from the increasingly coordinated Zirathi, withdrew their remaining troops. The Starborn Vengeance, though damaged, remained operational. In the command center, Darren, Arwyl Vanna, and a recovering Zerneth gathered with Veltri to discuss their next moves. Exonex will return with greater numbers, Zaraneth stated pragmatically. We cannot remain in this nebula indefinitely. They're tracking the chain's signature, Darren noted. But what if we turned that against them? Used Arwyl Vanna's freedom as a beacon for others. Veltri considered this. The bond you've established could potentially be extended to other Zirathi through direct contact. According to the ancient texts, each liberated individual becomes a potential liberator themselves. A cascade effect, Arwyl Vanna realized. Freedom spreading from one to many. Exactly, Darren said. We don't need to hide anymore. We need to be seen, specifically by enslaved Zirathi. If I can break one chain, I can break others. Zaraneth studied him with newfound respect. You propose we actively seek out our enslaved kin? That would mean infiltrating Exonex facilities, corporate enclaves, private military companies, anywhere our people have been sold. It's risky, Darren acknowledged, but it's also the last thing they'll expect. They think we'll run and hide. Instead, we'll take the fight to them. Butcher's voice joined the conversation. If I may, Captain, I've completed my analysis of Exonex's communication protocols. With some modifications, we could broadcast a signal that mimics their standard chain commands, but carries freedom instead of control. A liberation signal, Veltri breathed. Such a thing was theorized in our oldest texts, but we lacked the technological means. And the biological key, Arwyl Vanna added, looking at Darren, which we now have. The plan took shape rapidly. Using Darren's unique biological signature, the key that had broken Arwyl Vanna's chain, Butcher would create a broadcast that could potentially reach any Zirathi within range. Those freed would join their cause, expanding their numbers and capabilities. We'll need allies, Zerneth pointed out. The Syndicate might be persuaded to support us. They've had conflicts with Exonex for decades. In the frontier colonies, Darren added, many have suffered under Exonex's expansion. They'd welcome a chance to push back. For the first time since Darren had met her, Veltri smiled. It seems the ancient prophecy may indeed be fulfilled, not by divine intervention, but by choice and determination. The weeks that followed transformed their solitary resistance into a coordinated rebellion. The Starborn Vengeance, repaired and enhanced with technology salvaged from the defeated Exonex forces, became the flagship of a growing fleet. Each liberated Zirathi brought new skills, new resources, and new hope to their cause. Darren found himself increasingly comfortable with his role, not as a messianic figure, but as a catalyst for change. The bond deepened his connection to the Zirathi culture, history, and values, while his human perspective provided novel approaches to challenges they'd struggled with for generations. His relationship with Arwyl Vanna evolved as well. What had begun as a chance encounter between rescuer and prisoner blossomed into something deeper. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him one quiet evening as they stood on the observation deck, watching distant stars. "Free me that day, taking on this burden?" Darren considered the question seriously. "I've had plenty of regrets in my life. Bad jobs, worse decisions. But this? No, this feels right. For the first time, I'm part of something bigger than myself." Arwyl Vanna's hand found his, her touch warm and certain. In our oldest legends, freedom is described not as the absence of chains, but as the presence of choice. You gave me that gift first, the ability to choose my path. And you chose to fight, Darren noted. For now, she agreed. But someday, when Exonex is defeated and our people are truly free, there will be other choices to make. The implication hung between them, full of possibility. Their moment of quiet connection was interrupted by Zerneth's arrival. "We've received word from our operatives in the Centauri system. Exonex is gathering their forces for a major offensive. They brought in their entire security fleet." Darren nodded. "Good. That means they're scared." He turned back to the viewport, watching as their allied ships moved into formation around the Starborn Vengeance. They should be. The final confrontation with Exonex came not in some distant future, but mere months after Darren had first broken Arwyl Vanna's chain. The corporation, facing unprecedented resistance from liberated Zirathi and their growing coalition of allies, made a desperate gambit, consolidating their remaining enslaved Zirathi at their headquarters, the Crucible, under the direct supervision of Dr. Vance. Their intelligence suggested over 1,000 Zirathi were being held there, many in cryostasis, awaiting new neural programming. If Exonex succeeded, a new generation of chains would be forged, ones potentially resistant to Darren's liberation effect. "It's a trap," Zerneth stated bluntly during the War Council. "They know we cannot ignore such a concentration of our people. They're using our kin as bait." "Of course it's a trap," Darren agreed. "But that doesn't mean we can't spring it on our terms." The battle plan they developed was audacious, combining frontal assault with subtle infiltration. While the main fleet engaged Exonex's defenses, drawing attention and resources, a smaller team, including Darren, Arwyl Vanna, and Zerneth, would penetrate the Crucible itself. Butcher, whose systems had been significantly upgraded with Zirathi technology, provided the key to their infiltration strategy. Exonex's facility uses quantum lock protocols for critical systems. However, their employee authentication relies on much simpler biometric scanning. With the proper credentials, "We walk in through the front door," Darren finished. The credentials came from an unexpected source, a mid-level Exonex executive who'd been quietly feeding information to their network for months, motivated by a crisis of conscience after witnessing the treatment of Zirathi subjects. As their fleet prepared for the assault, Darren found himself drawn to the memorial they'd created for fallen warriors, including Myra. Her sacrifice had become a symbol of their cause, not just fighting against chains, but choosing freedom even at great cost. She believed in the prophecy more than anyone, Arwyl Vanna said, joining him before the memorial. I'm still not convinced about all that, Darren admitted. Seems like a lot of responsibility to put on one person's shoulders. Veltri appeared silently beside them. Perhaps that is the point you've taught us, Liberator. No single individual, human or Zirathi, should bear the weight of destiny alone. Freedom is a shared burden, a collective choice. The assault on the Crucible began at dawn, local time, a symbolic choice reflecting the Zirathi belief that new beginnings required new light. The combined fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, immediately engaging Exonex's orbital defenses. While the space battle raged, Darren's infiltration team approached in a captured Exonex shuttle, transmitting the stolen credentials. The ruse worked long enough for them to dock at a secondary research bay, where they quickly neutralized the security detail. Butcher, guide us to the primary containment area, Darren instructed via secure comm. Accessing facility schematics, the AI responded. Caution advised. Internal sensors show unusual activity in the central laboratory. Dr. Vance appears to be accelerating some form of procedure. They moved through the facility with practiced efficiency, Zirathi warriors eliminating resistance, while Darren and Arwell Vanna focused on reaching the containment area. The bond between them had grown powerful enough that they functioned almost as a single unit, anticipating each other's movements without need for verbal communication. When they finally reached the central laboratory, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. Hundreds of cryostasis chambers lined the walls, each containing a Zirathi warrior in suspended animation. At the center stood Dr. Vance, a thin, precise man whose calm demeanor belied the monstrous nature of his work. "Ah, the famous Liberator," Vance said without looking up from his console. "Right on schedule. You've saved me the trouble of hunting you down." Darren advanced cautiously, noting the unusual lack of security in the room. "You don't seem surprised to see us." Vance smiled thinly. "Surprised? I engineered this entire scenario." He gestured to the cryo chambers. "Every Zirathi specimen here has been specifically modified to respond to your unique liberation signature. The moment you attempt to break their chains, a cascading neural feedback loop will trigger." "You're bluffing," Zaraneth growled. "Am I? Why do you think I allowed your spy to feed you information about this facility? Why make it seem so lightly defended?" Vance's eyes gleamed with intellectual satisfaction. "Science requires controlled environments. You, Darren Holt, are the final variable in my experiment." RYL Vanna stepped forward. "What experiment?" "The complete understanding of freedom as a biological phenomenon," Vance replied, as though explaining a simple concept to a child. "For centuries, Exonex has perfected control, the chain that binds. But you," he nodded to Darren, "you've demonstrated that freedom might be equally quantifiable, equally replicable." "Freedom isn't a formula," Darren countered. "It's a choice. A choice born of biochemical processes," Vance corrected. "Processes I've spent months studying through the data gathered each time you've liberated another Zirathi. And now, I've replicated that same biochemical signature, but with one crucial modification." With a theatrical gesture, Vance activated a sequence on his console. Throughout the laboratory, cryostasis chambers began to open, revealing Zirathi warriors who stepped out with mechanical precision, their eyes vacant. "They appear to be free," Vance explained. "They will pass every test, demonstrate all the biological markers of liberation. But beneath it all, the chain remains invisible, undetectable, but absolute. You've created slaves who don't know they're enslaved," Arwell Vanna realized with horror. Vance smiled. "The perfect product. No resistance, no rebellion, no messy ethical concerns. Clients get their warriors, the Zirathi believe themselves free, and Exonex profits without opposition." Darren studied the awakened Zirathi, searching for some sign, some tell that would reveal the truth of Vance's claim. Through the bond, he reached out, trying to sense any connection to these warriors as he had with others he'd freed. Nothing. Where there should have been the bright threads of consciousness, there was only emptiness, not the void of slavery, but a simulation of freedom so perfect it left no room for genuine connection. Now, Vance continued, I require one final piece of data. He pressed another button, and restraints suddenly engage around Darren's and Arwyle Vanna's positions, catching them off guard. Direct neural sampling from the original liberation pair. Zerneth and the other warriors moved to intervene, only to find themselves surrounded by the newly awakened Zirathi, blank-eyed copies of their kin, moving with perfect coordination to subdue them. As laboratory assistants approached with neural extraction equipment, Darren struggled against his restraints. The bond surged within him, carrying emotions from all connected Zirathi, fear, rage, determination. But beneath those surface feelings, he sensed something else, a deep, resolute certainty that freedom, once truly experienced, could never be replicated or contained. It won't work, Darren told Vance with sudden clarity. Your formula, your fake freedom, it's missing the essential component. Vance paused, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his triumph. And what might that be? Choice, Arwyle Vanna answered. True freedom requires the possibility of rejection. Your subjects can't choose to refuse freedom because they've never really been offered it. As she spoke, Darren concentrated on the bond, focusing not on controlling it, but on opening himself completely to its flow. The connection between him and the liberated Zirathi had never been about dominance. It was mutual, voluntary, a shared decision renewed each moment. Butcher, he called out. Execute Freedom Protocol Alpha. Throughout the facility, speakers crackled to life, broadcasting a complex harmonic pattern, a sound derived from the unique resonance of Darren's brainwaves when he'd first broken Arwyle Vanna's chain. Not a command, but an offering, the possibility of choice. The effect on Vance's perfect Zirathi was immediate. They staggered, expressions shifting from blank compliance to confusion to dawning awareness. The neural conditioning that had been disguised as freedom cracked under the pressure of genuine choice. Impossible, Vance whispered, watching his experiment collapse. The conditioning was flawless. That's the thing about freedom, Darren said as Arwyle Vanna, newly released from her restraints by the awakening warriors, helped him to his feet. It's messy, unpredictable, real. Throughout the crucible, similar scenes were playing out as the liberation signal spread. Zirathi, who had been enslaved for generations, suddenly found themselves truly free. Not because someone had broken their chains, but because they chose to break them themselves. Vance, seeing his life's work unraveling, made a desperate lunge for an emergency control panel. Zerneth intercepted him with fluid grace, pinning him against his own console. What shall we do with him? She asked, looking to Darren and Arwyle Vanna. Darren considered the scientist, a man who had caused immeasurable suffering in pursuit of control. That's not my decision to make. It belongs to those he harmed. In the days that followed, as news of Exonex's defeat spread across the galaxy, the corporation's empire began to crumble. Revelations about their illegal experimentation, slave trading, and violation of sentient rights led to massive sanctions and eventual dissolution by the Galactic Consortium. The liberated Zirathi, now numbering in the thousands, faced a new challenge, defining themselves beyond their warrior heritage and the trauma of enslavement. Some chose to return to their ancestral homeworld, others to integrate into various galactic communities, while many remained with the fleet that had freed them, forming the nucleus of a new Zirathi society. 6 months after the Battle of the Crucible, Darren stood on the bridge of a new ship, not the gloomy Susan of his mercenary days, but a vessel christened the Second Chance. Beside him, Arwyle Vanna studied the star charts displaying their next destination. The outer colonies have requested our assistance with remaining Exonex outposts, she reported. And 3 more Zirathi enclaves have been located in the Antares sector. Darren nodded. We'll get to them all, eventually. Zerneth, now serving as the elected representative of the Free Zirathi to the Galactic Consortium, joined them at the viewport. The Liberation Accords have been ratified. No sentient being may be genetically bound or neurally conditioned against their will. Your biological signature has been classified as a protected medical resource. And Dr. Vance? Darren asked, sentenced to rehabilitative service on Zyra, helping to undo the damage his research caused. Zaranetha's expression softened slightly. Some argued for harsher punishment, but Veltri reminded us that liberation includes moving beyond cycles of retribution. Veltri herself entered the bridge, looking younger somehow since the liberation of her people. The last of the modified Zirathi have been successfully treated. The false freedom has been replaced with genuine choice. And what have they chosen? Arwell Vanna asked. Many paths, Veltri replied with satisfaction. Some remain warriors, others become scholars, artists, explorers. As it should be, Darren gazed out at the stars, feeling the bond within him. No longer a burden or obligation, but a connection freely maintained with those who chose to share it. The prophecy, whether coincidence or destiny, had been fulfilled not by his actions alone, but by countless choices made by individuals seeking freedom. You don't owe us anything, Arwell Vanna said softly, echoing. Words they'd shared many times since their first meeting. But I think we owe each other everything. Darren took her hand, feeling the weight of all they'd experienced together. What next? He asked. Not just of Arwell Vanna, but of all those connected through the bond. The response came not as words, but as a shared sentiment. A collective will to explore, to heal, to build something new. Not bound by chains of obligation, but united by choice. As the second chance engaged its engines and set course for distant stars, Darren reflected that true freedom had turned out to be not the absence of connections, but the presence of those freely chosen. He had freed Arwell Vanna from chains, and in turn, she and her people had shown him what it meant to be truly liberated from isolation, from purposelessness, from fear. Together, they moved forward into an uncertain future, guided by a truth they had all come to understand. Freedom was not a destination, but a journey taken one choice at a time.